Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about knowing, owning, and showing your value. Regina Huber is a transformational leadership coach, and she's going to go through her powerful leadership transformation framework. So there's 4 critical areas to her framework that will walk you through the components of what you need to incorporate to move the needle in your career. Regina is the CEO of Transform Your Performance. She drives bold, driven value, heart-centered leadership of self and others, and she helps her coaching clients reach the next level of her career. Regina created 3 signature coaching frameworks: the Powerful Leadership Transformation, the New Paradigm Leadership, and the Get Your Dream Salary. So stay tuned for my conversation with Regina Huber. So Regina, I know that you talk about stop blending in, start standing out, and showing your unique brilliance, and owning your value. And obviously this conversation is geared towards the woman in the corporate world that feels kind of stuck in their position. So what do you mean by stop blending in and start standing out?
Yes, hi Rosie. It's a pleasure to be here. It's this is a really huge opportunity for me to have this conversation with you and to inspire our audiences together. So I'm delighted about it and I'm grateful for it.
Good.
This stop blending in, start standing out is all about what I call in my work your distinctive uniqueness. Okay. And what does that mean? Well, we often are told as women we have to own our value. But what I have seen with my clients and in the past also with myself is that we don't always even know exactly what that is. And so I like to talk about knowing, owning, and showing your value so that then you can stand out and be extraordinary and no longer blend in, and you can distinguish yourself as the ideal candidate for the role you want, the project you want to be on, or, if it's maybe a different organization. So how can you stand out as the ideal candidate for that new job? Right? So this is all about your unique brilliance. We all have it. Everybody has unique, specific greatness and genius. And it's also, though, about addressing sometimes the other side of the coin, which is, what are our shortcomings? How do we address them? Do we always have to be perfect in everything? Probably not. I always encourage my clients to really focus and hone in on their strengths and build on those rather than focusing so much on what we're not so great at, because we tend to do that as women anyway more. However, having said that, I think there are certain skills that we sometimes do need to improve that are, for example, required for leaders in any capacity, right? Leadership skills are important for all of us. Communication skills are important for all of us. Interpersonal skills, right? But as long as we have this self-leadership and this self-awareness and this really this great drive to practice value-driven leadership and to be a little bold in that, I think we can pull it off, and we don't have to know everything. That's really an important message. Sometimes, coaching can help, of course, depending what makes sense for everybody, right? And then, of course, this distinctive uniqueness is a part of a bigger framework that I have built, my Powerful Leadership Transformation, or PLT.
Got it. Okay. So I want to kind of go back to a few things that you said. So obviously, this is a perfect conversation because you're absolutely right. Sometimes people, when we talk about knowing your value, people are like, well, what does that mean? You know, so I like that you say knowing, owning, and showing your value. And that's just you learning about yourself, you knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at. And you actually said not to focus on what you're not good at because we naturally focus on what we're not good at, but also showing what we are good at. So that's knowing. I've recently released a workbook that says know your worth. And we're not talking about obviously the person, people, you know, there's no price to life, right? But you still have to know your professional compensation value. And there's a lot of stuff that goes in there. But once you understand, and we'll talk about this with your framework, but you have to be able to show how you contribute and how you will make a difference. So it is this conversation is going to be very important because we want to talk about what does our value mean in the business world. What does that look like? So I do like the way you say knowing, owning, and showing. That is fantastic. And when I think one of the things that people, specifically women, is you're afraid to speak up. And so you blend in. And this is really important because in order for people to notice you, you have to stand out. You have to speak up. And I know sometimes that's really hard for women. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's hard for women to stand out or to advocate for themselves?
Well, I think what happens oftentimes is that we underestimate who we are and our value and our worth, and that's also probably why you wrote this ebook, right? And it's really also about how is what we know and who we are relevant to our environment. How can we make an impact? And I'm oftentimes also really surprised how many women, and maybe also men, but how many women, because I mostly work with women as coaching clients, that's why I know them better, don't have a written vision. They don't, and so they sometimes lose that focus a little bit, and they focus far too much on what other people think about them. And because they tend to speak up a little bit less often, they think that one time they speak up, it has to be perfect. Now, when you practice it more often, then, it doesn't matter so much if that one time doesn't sound as sophisticated, as the other times maybe. So it's really also about practicing it. But why do they not want to do that? Well, also, partly it might also be, of course, because in the past, most of the companies, not all, but most of the companies were created by men for men, at least in big corporations. And that's changing for sure. But of course, then, women always thought, and that might still be part of their corporate DNA in a way, that they had to blend into that environment and now become somebody else, or at least not look too different or not sound too different, right? And I believe that when women can own their authentic voice and their authenticity and who they are, and express that even also in how they dress, I know there's dress codes, okay, but you want to also still be who you are and be authentic in how you show up in all senses. And I think that's when you become the most powerful, and when it actually becomes easier to stand out and to speak up.
Okay. So now you talked about, owning your authenticity. Can you give maybe an example of how that actually applies with one of your clients as to how, what transformation they had when they realized what their authenticity, what owning their authenticity means?
Yes, one specific client comes to mind immediately. She works in financial services, which, we know that it tends to be a little bit more formal in how people are dressed and how they are supposed to be dressed or expected to be dressed. And we often think of gray suits, but, you know, she just wasn't the type for that. And she wanted to wear her hair like she likes it, maybe in a ponytail and not all sophisticated in different ways. It's just not who she is. And actually, I think if she had done that, then that would have silenced her in a way, because she would no longer have been, she would have been playing a role, basically.
Mhm.
We brought out for her what mattered for her, to be able to speak up in meetings and not be talked over by a colleague, which was a serious problem that she had. And it was a very specific person that constantly took her ideas. And I know this sounds a little bit like a cliche, but it is actually a real case. and this person stopped talking over her when she applied some specific language that we practiced together, that I also partly took from the conversational intelligence modality that I studied. And that gave her a lot of, it gave her a lot of self-confidence in that moment to have that language. And I also helped her prepare energetically. And because she is very holistically oriented in her, you know, the other part of her life, she took that on and integrated it into her presence, into her business presence. And this was tremendously successful for her. And she feels now so much better about how she shows up in presentations also, because she has to do a lot of presentations.
Oh, I love that. I love that you were able to help her not only figure out what she wants to wear that still fits within, you know, that particular industry, but the language, and the language is so critically important. And so I think that's part of humanizing people in the workplace, right? Through, you know, authentic and inclusive leadership. And so I know you're a transformational leadership coach, but how can a management team, a leadership team, humanize the workplace more so that people are comfortable bringing their authentic selves in?
Well, there's certainly a lot of ways, right? The most important word for me is trust.
Okay.
Trust building, you know, trust is the glue that holds it all together, that holds your team together. Trust is also important for your own career as a leader, to really build that trust in all directions. So you can then have better connections, you can network more proficiently, and just have a better time at work as well. And also trust with yourself, right? Do you trust yourself to actually do the work, to step into the role that you want? As we step back to the question about humanizing the workplace, so trust building is really, really important. And there are, of course, several different tools we can use, like story sharing. I call it, by the way, story sharing and not storytelling for a reason, right? Or just really encouraging our team members to share more about them by asking the right questions, or more open-ended questions. And this cannot always happen in group settings. So we have to be really careful and sensitive about, okay, what questions do we ask in a one-on-one meeting? What questions can we ask in group settings? How does it all fit together, right? And I also believe that, so I created 2 frameworks, and one I already mentioned. I certainly want to talk a little bit more about that, because that's probably the most relevant for most of our audience. But I also created this other framework, the New Paradigm Leadership. And this is all about really putting the people in the center of the organization. I like to say the people are the heart of the organization.
Yes.
Without them, nothing works, nothing happens. So if you treat your people well, if you consider them with their very unique and specific aspirations, desires, their challenges, right? Then, and you do that again in an authentic way, and consistently, then that's when you build trust. And as leaders, we can also share our own stories, our own transformation, we weren't always maybe successful in the past, and our life hasn't always been an upward line, right? And sometimes it's a roller coaster. So when we share more about those transformational stories, these are the inspirational stories.
That makes so much sense. And I like that you say story sharing, not storytelling, because when you tell, you're just implies that someone's just there. But when you're sharing, that's when you're making those relationships and those connections in an authentic way. And I think that's part of humanizing the workplace. And I think we're much better today at humanizing the workplace because of the pandemic, because the pandemic forced us to look at the whole person and not just the employee. And so a lot of employers are now assisting their employees to go work out, or, you know, take some time to go to the doctor or whatever during the workday, meaning that there's flexibility and employers understand that it's the whole person and not just, you know, from 9 to 5, you're only going to be an employee, because that's not the case. So I really like that. Now, let's talk a little bit about your powerful transformation leadership framework. Like, what is that? Who is that for? And what is it?
Yeah. So the powerful leadership transformation is really for anybody. It's not just for people in a leadership role or position, right? Okay. Because first we need to lead ourselves. And that is true for anybody who wants to be the pilot of their careers rather than the passenger. Right? Because if we do not take the steering wheel, somebody else will do it for us. Yeah. And I really want everybody to be inspired to take their careers in their own hands, because it's really your responsibility to steer it forward. And then other people should be helping you for sure, you know, mentors, coaches, whoever you choose to have by your side, your manager for sure. But I also think it's important to realize that no one can truly empower us but ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Powerful Leadership Transformation, or PLT framework, has 4 pillars. And again, you know, this is for yourself. This is a lot about self-leadership. But once you master these 4 pillars, people around that you work with in your environment will see it, and you will automatically also transfer some of it to your team and to probably your peers and other people you interact with. Plus, you can also actively actually take what you have learned in terms of transformation or tools in this framework. You can also, of course, pass it on to your team. And I always encourage people to do that. Now, I just said, you know, no one can empower you but yourself. So the first pillar of 4 of this framework is a self-empowering mindset and heart set. It's super important for all of us to remember that all you need to be successful is already inside of you. Yes, it's in your mind and in your heart. So a lot of people talk about mindset, of course, but it's not just about that. Right. So yes, we need that self-empowering mindset. Very important for sure, because, you know, we need to be ready sometimes to shed some of the limiting stuff, limiting beliefs, inner narratives that don't serve us maybe, or your success or our success, and maybe also deactivate old stories that maybe keeping us smaller than we really are. Right. So that's all about the mindset. And because oftentimes our conditioning, if it's not empowering conditioning, it can drag us down, and it can keep us from showing up powerfully and confidently, right? And we see that a lot, that we have all this subconscious stuff going on, because most of our beliefs that are holding us down or keeping us smaller than we really are subconscious. So it's worth going really, really deep, so that our subconscious doesn't put us on autopilot. Because even if you talk to a woman, she says, "Oh, I don't want to speak up in a meeting," or "I'm afraid to speak up in a meeting. I want to, but I'm afraid," then, you know, she doesn't always know why that is, right? So all this self-doubt the famous imposter syndrome and low self-value, fear of rejection, and all of that. Sometimes we don't know where it even comes from. And I believe we don't always have to know, but we still need to address it, right? So we can then address these sneaky, irrational fears, as I call them, or disempowering beliefs and thoughts and thought patterns to go away, or to somehow at least deactivate them.
Right.
But I also believe that the mind is most powerful when it's led by the heart. Right. So that's why I put the two together, mindset and heart set, because they are better together.
I like that. I like that you have the mindset and the heart set. And I like that you say that everything that you need, you already have it inside you, because I think that's so true. When I was younger, I would kind of seek approval from others before I made a decision that I was wrestling with. And now I'm like, oh, no, I don't need to consult with other people because I know what to do, what feels right. So I love number one. Okay, so what's your second pillar?
Yeah, I just want to go back to what you just said, if that's okay, Rosie.
Okay, sure.
Because, you know, oftentimes we make the best decisions with our hearts.
Oh, yeah.
Intuition is so undervalued, and we have been given it for a reason. We have this gift to also use our intuition in addition to due diligence, right?
Absolutely.
So really use that power, that specific wisdom that's in your heart, in addition to the intellectual power of the mind. And that's, I think, where the magic is. I
love that. All right, good.
Yeah. So yeah, the second pillar is, we talked about that already a little bit. It's your distinctive uniqueness. Okay. And, you know, we talked about, you know, what is it all about? It's about the two sides of the coin. So it's about your very unique genius, your brilliance, and owning it and showing it. And on the other hand, also addressing what we need to address in ourselves, right? And also sometimes just realizing that we don't have to learn everything ourselves. We can complement skills and talents through other people in our teams, right? I also believe it's a lot about integrity, and really being integrity with ourselves as well, and really respecting how magnificent we are, right? And all of that. So that would be the second pillar of the framework.
Okay. And I like that. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to 3.
Yeah, 3 is a body and energy conscious presence. You know, I learned a lot by experience through my life on several different continents and different cultures and language zones, and many different adventures. I have a very eclectic experience. I certainly studied a lot too, but you know, a lot of that I learned, for example, also through dance. For example, also through my holistic studies of holistic modalities. Not everything was always leadership related. And in fact, I was actually thrown into the cold water with my first leadership position. You know, I was just like, somebody saw that potential in me, and I didn't have relevant background, and gladly they did, right? A lot of times that doesn't happen for everybody. But so over time, I, of course, added knowledge on more consciously and more intentionally. But as I said, a lot I learned also even through dance, like leadership lessons that I learned through dance. I wrote about this in blogs and in articles on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn newsletter. And, you know, so all of this flows into that third pillar, a body and energy conscious presence. We always hear that we need executive presence, but what is that even, right? I published not too long ago an article in the corporate magazine about this topic, really focusing in on energy, because again, just as we don't talk a lot about intuition in business, we don't talk a lot about energy in business, but it's really super important.
Yes.
Okay? And you might have heard about, you know, Amy Cuddy. She's super famous, right?
Yes.
And her power posing videos. This is about the body conscious aspect, because even just getting fully present in your body and taking a few deep belly breaths and maybe doing a power pose, all of this has a physiological effect that then reports back to how you feel. right? So it really is everything in your body and in your emotions, in your feelings, in how you show up is connected, right?
Yes, for sure. Oh my gosh, especially that breathing, that breathing, everybody's like, oh, breathing again, but breathing is like the fundamental thing that we need to do on a daily basis. Otherwise, we're not alive. So
Yeah.
when you bring everything back to your breath, I think that's when you just ground yourself, you center yourself. And yeah, I love Amy Cuddy as well, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do on an almost daily basis, I do Wim Hof breathing in the morning. But, even if you don't find the time for that or whatever, our excuses, sometimes when you go into a challenging situation, it is worth taking a few moments at least. We don't always know in advance whether we're going to go into that situation. So you can have a few really quick tools that you have at that you can just think of right in the moment and do. And for me, it's the energy tool and it's also the breathing, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how much time I have. And there's certainly also NLP tools that you can use, and that I write about those also in my book, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine. But about the energy part now of the third pillar, so it's body and energy conscious presence, right? We, or at least most of us probably, have heard that it takes 7 seconds to make a first impression.
Yes.
However, it only takes 0.07 seconds for our brains to figure out whether we can trust someone.
Wait, say that again?
0.07 seconds it takes for our brains to figure out whether we can trust someone. And that is part of our survival mechanism. And that's